This is the podcast between an old school mentor and a digital mentee on managing and/or working with people, navigating a career, growing profits, and not killing your coworkers along the way. Now let's join the consultant, Hayden Shaw, and the millennial who fixes Hayden's iPhone, Seth Tower Hurd.
It's a consultant and a millennial. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. He's Hayden Shaw. He's helped over 30,000 managers at some of the biggest companies in the world and a lot of small to medium-sized nonprofits, family businesses, and corporations along the way. You can find out more about what he does at peopledrivenresults.com. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. Entrepreneur, you can find out what I do at digitalprofitfarm.com. You need a website, you need SEO, you need social media management, or you need podcasting to reach your customers when they're doing stuff like, taking the laundry out or, just doing those mundane things of life. Now you can market during those, what I guess the experts are calling found times. You just got to talk to them like we're doing right here. It's done wondrous things for both Hayden and myself. That's why we joined forces on this. And by the way, if your email campaign, if you're a business, it's like, you know what, we're not sending good emails, do a podcast and use that content for your emails. It'll change the game up. All right. Today's topic. When to collaborate, when to make the decision. I would say about half the time. So, I started really in a professional role when I was 19. So I've had about a 15, 16-year career, somewhere about 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine, if you want to go biblical on this thing. Not all in a row, but this is one of those ones that I'm probably going to take a...
When you have 7 years of famine in a row, you get really thin.
Yeah, you do. So not all in a row, but I've talked on different episodes about how I would love a do-over on different things. And this is one of those ones that as I look back at a couple of managerial roles, I would have changed a couple of key things about how to usher a major initiative through, or something that I was doing that I knew everybody wasn't going to love. And sometimes you do have to be collaborative and let people, say what they say, and you got to listen, because a lot of times you can drive the car off the cliff if you're a manager who's not listening to what your employees say. But a lot of other times, 12 hands on the wheel means you are going to drive into the ditch and flip the car over as well. So there's danger all the way around.
That's one of the things people don't understand about federal government. Hey, I speak for a living, so whatever that Porky Pig thing that just came out of my mouth was, I have no idea. Let's blame it on Friday. Anyway, who knows what kind of that was. Federal government employees get a lot of grief on late night talk shows and comedians, and I'd say a quarter of them deserve it. But part of the challenge that those of us who work in even nonprofits, but especially business, don't get is you've got all those congressmen and women, congresspersons working. They're driving the bus, and so you got a lot of bus drivers plus the press. And so having that many people making decisions and being able to evaluate, reference, call a hearing on your work, it changes how fast you move, and it changes what you can do. And so, it's really easy for business people to go, the federal government. And, there are some problems, no doubt about it. But a lot of it comes from having too many people who can make a decision. And therefore, it really does limit the amount of movement and the amount of what you can do. And it ties people's hands.
Yeah. And, one of the things I've loved about being out on my own, I'm not going to be a big enough jerk to go back to different companies I worked for and say, told you so. Like, hey, I tried this and we couldn't get it done, and now I'm doing it on my own, and look at me, it's working, because that would be a jerk thing to do, and because I'm too busy. When I'm less busy, I'm not sure I won't be tempted to go do that. But
well, last episode we were talking about The Office, and I do remember one episode where they lost an account, and so they went and egged them. They egged the building on the way out because they lost the account. And so it has been done before in the annals of shows you should binge on to help your business.
Yeah. By the way, the last episode, fantastic. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, you can do it wherever you do subscribe to podcasts. A lot of people do iTunes. There's a lot of fantastic podcast players out there that you can grab wherever. And no, I didn't want to look juvenile. I just want to look smart. And what I had to do is be focused on what the future is. But sometimes there is that temptation I mean, at least I don't have that in like relationships. At least I don't want to get on Facebook and like make somebody from high school jealous or something. I just want to say I told you so in business.
It's all about where you compete.
Okay, so here's the thing, though. I am a millennial manager. I'm a millennial business owner now. And in many ways, you talked about how I'm an exception to the rule because I grew up on a farm, about half millennial, half World War II generation of my actual makeup, but very collaborative, very not pushing from the top down because I said so kind of leadership style. Right. And,
right.
Well, that's a good thing. Not always, because, one of the main topics you talk about, and I think your next book is going to be on, is on change management. And, when you got change management and you've got like just too much collaboration, you don't have change management, you have stagnation management.
Well, that's right. So how do you know when you're under collaborating? How do you know when you're over collaborating? Because, collaboration is the answer to all kinds of things. Communication was that answer before. Innovation was that answer in the Great Recession. And so there are times when you do what I do, you're in a room full of leaders, you ask them, what are the challenges? And, they're trying to solve some people problem. And there'll be certain words that come up all over the world. And collaboration is now one of those magic words.
Okay.
If we could only collaborate more, then we would have better decisions. And the research shows that that's not always the case. For example, if people who, W. Shaw did a study in the 50s and discovered that if you have people who all are virtually the same background, same thinking, same degrees, they don't make very good decisions once you get above simple tasks. When there's complexity to it, they don't have enough variety in the way they see the world to make a good decision. Secondly, if the collaborators all pretty much are in agreement. Alfred W. Sloan, who was in the top 4 finalists for Fortune magazine's CEOs of the past century, he was kind of the person that created General Motors for many decades, the largest company. He's the genius behind that. And the person that Peter Drucker, father of modern management, said was the greatest business leader of all time. Anyway, Alfred W. Sloan once had a meeting where people trained in from all over the country. And he said to them, well, I think we all ought to go home and come back next week and take some time and think about this, because we're all of the same mind and we're going to make a horrible decision. And so Sloan's idea was, you've got to go out and find dissent. You've got to go out and find alternate possibilities. And he wouldn't make a decision until there were 2 or 3 possible options to it. So if everybody saw the same option as the best option, he knew they were in real danger of making a bad decision. So collaboration is a bad idea if everybody sees it the same way. And that's often how people define collaboration is, oh, collaboration, it's beautiful. We were all in such agreement. Good. We're all going off the cliff together.
Yeah, and I think back in some of the conflicts I've had in my career, and one of the things that kind of regularly came up was kind of this idea of collaboration and team buy-in and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going, okay, either it's my job to move the ball down the field or it's not. And you keep wanting to run plays that get us sacked. And a lot of times I just kind of pushed over to my detriment. I mean, to my detriment. I probably spent too much time in my 20s working for nonprofits and not getting into the business sector full time fast enough. And I think that part of that is, we talked about in a different episode, when you work for a nonprofit, you expect people to be nice to you. You like just think that's going to be the culture.
Well, like I talked about federal government earlier and how many people make decisions in nonprofits. Part of what people get paid is freedom. So understanding organizations, it's important to understand how much freedom people want. And when I work with smaller organizations, part of what they give people is freedom, because they can't give them necessarily the same benefits, or they can't give them the same perks. There's maybe not a box seats at the
NBA game or something like that. Yeah.
Well, because I live in Chicago, I almost said the Cubs, but being a Cardinals fan who's in pain in Chicago now that the Cubs are better the third season in a row. I couldn't believe the words almost came out of my mouth. Since it is baseball season. Anyway, since you don't have those perks, part of what you give people is freedom. Whereas part of the reason you quit corporations and went on your own, Seth, is the freedom of it.
Yeah.
And so in a nonprofit organization, you usually don't pay people as much as they would make on the business sector. And so in compensation, they expect to have a lot more freedom, a lot more say. They expect to be able to do what they want more. It's harder. Not impossible. Well-run nonprofits do it, but it's harder for nonprofits to get people to give up their freedom for the betterment of the organization. That's a major turn for an organization, for a nonprofit culture to make. And so decision-making in nonprofits is by definition more collaborative. You have to get more yeses because more people can say no. More people can, as a old mentor of mine used to say back in the olden days, where there's a cord on the train or the bus, more people can pull the cord and stop the train or stop the bus. That's the challenge in nonprofit leadership and decision making. It's by definition more collaborative. And there's even articles on it called Leader as Lightning Rod, where a leader can be a lightning rod and make fast change, but almost always lightning rods have to be replaced once lightnings burn them.
That's a very good analogy. So, I look at a couple things where I was trying to make major changes. And again, this happened to be a nonprofit, but I'll just go, it was strictly a metrics-based thing, right?
Yeah.
We're sending too many emails. MailChimp has flagged us as potential spammers because our open rates are so low. These are the changes I'm going to make. Some people aren't going to like it, but it's because those people are sending crap emails that nobody wants to open.
Right.
And again, when I said that I went out on my own, not necessarily, I don't know that my primary motivation was, the increased revenue that can come from owning your own business or the freedom, although those things were both very good. I just thought I was right and I wanted to prove it. So we're talking about like less than 9% open rates. The open rates for the emails I send for this podcast, are, hovering around 42%, which is out of this world insane. See, you really should hire me. Digitalprofitfarm.com. Every organization would love to have that kind of open rates, right? So in 2018, in hindsight, I can say I'm for sure right. In 2015, I'm fighting this battle where we could lose our account and people still don't want to make changes. They still want to talk about it. And all I want to do. Can you tell that
Seth has PSTD from this?
Yes, I do. Oh, well, let's collaborate. Your collaboration could cost the organization all of our emails. How about we don't collaborate? How about you do what I say?
How about we not do this? Now, this also factors into the generational discussion as well. So one of the challenges, especially in marketing or other fields where there have been disproportionate number of millennials and involved in things with older generations who've been making the decisions and doing it a certain way for years. Decision making also has generational components to it because often older generations are like, hey, wait your turn. I've been doing this a long time, Sonny. And younger generations, and I wrote about this in Sticking Points. One of the generational sticking points is decision making. One of the 12 places where the generations answer the same question differently is around decision making. And you really, what I wrote in the book is you got 6 options. And younger generations only like working with 3 of them. But let me just read off the 6 options.
Yep, go for it.
I have a son with dyslexia, and he said, Dad, can you buy your book on the Kindle so I can listen to it? And so it really hurt me to pay full price for the book once. There are, so the boss decides and announces, number 1. The boss decides and announces. Everybody's been in that one. Number 2, the boss asks all employees for input and then decides. That's a classic one when the boomers grew up. Boss asks for input, but everybody knows the boss decides. Then the boss asks more tenured employees for input and then decides. That's a very common one. Boss goes off golfing or to the spa with their tenured employees for an outing, and the tenured employees, the inner circle, gives the input, and then and then the group decides. The boss and a few employees meet and decide. The savviest person on the topic decides. And, in this case, it would be you and a couple of other people, Seth, who would have been the savviest person who knew what to do with MailChimp and copywriting. And then number 6, the team talks it over and comes to consensus, or at least a clear majority. If not, the boss or the savvier person decides. And so those are 6 possible ways people can make healthy decisions. Problem is, 3 of those are very much boss-driven or crony-driven, and it is the way most organizations work. The challenge is younger generations find those to be off-putting and, matter of fact, head for other places. Decision-making is one of the things that repels people fairly quickly. Matter of fact, when we did one of our very first episodes, and we talked about what are the 6 changes, what are the 6 problems your organization has to solve, generational problems your organization has to solve to stay solvent. One of them was your decision-making system's broken. And organizations that use boss decides, or boss and some cronies, or boss and some long-term and tenured employees decide, they're just leaving out a lot of ideas, and they're disengaging generations. They're going to go someplace else. It's pretty much that simple.
Okay, so I will say, as a business owner now, finding clients is not the biggest challenge for the company. Okay. Figuring out how to go to the next level of growth is the biggest challenge for the company, because of not everybody who listens to this is going to get this, but cash flow and risk assessment and, how do you make that leap? So again, digitalprofitfarm.com, gosh dang, you should hire me, because I'm getting a bunch of clients, so I can probably get them for you too. That's why I'm getting a bunch of clients, because I can get them for you. I can get you customers. However, I will say, don't go to my website, delete this podcast, and forget you ever met me. If you have a very stagnant organization where I'm going to have to come in and hold everybody's hand and give them a little hug and get them a lemonade, just to get them on board to do what I do, because I do not work with organizations like that, because I don't have time. Because all of a sudden my profit margin, just gets shot out of a cannon, because I'm going to spend all my time just talking to people when I just want to be doing the work and be working with strong, effective teams that I can collaborate with. So
give me just a second. Hey, Josh, can you hand me that? I'll take it right now. All right. Well, I now have a coffee because I am here in my son's apartment in Jacksonville, Florida, and he went off to Duncan. And so late flight, and so this is good. Coffee infusion. Anyway, who says that millennials are all about themselves? That's just completely untrue. Thank you, millennial son. Anyway, yeah, bunch of haters. And so I think one of the most important things that you can do is, and we've talked about this off and on in past episodes, is learn what you're wired. I'm just the opposite of you, Seth, because I grew up working in nonprofits and religious nonprofits. I grew up moving at a much slower pace. Now, I know your profits will die. You would have to structure your pricing based on how much care and tending I have to spend with your organization to get what needs to get done. So you'd have to build in some contracts, some clauses around, hey, if this is what you get, anything after that, we're billing by the hour. Time and materials, dude. And anybody in the building industry knows that's where you make your money, is on change orders and time and materials.
Okay. So maybe I just need to think through it like that.
And you may not. You may be at the stage of life where you're like, nope. And one of our parts of our tagline here is, you don't want to kill your coworkers along the way. You don't want to kill your customers along the way, because that's really bad buzz on the internet.
That is very bad buzz on the internet. So we haven't landed on this decision-making thing yet, because I actually do think we're going to hit an answer here. Sometimes we're just trying to get you to the third level of business thinking, get you to 30,000 feet, look down on the situation, get a different perspective. I think there probably is a clear answer here.
Yeah, well, you bet.
The boss and the cronies thing, the reason, honestly, I think that doesn't work usually is because it's not just because you're cutting the legs out from under your team members who are on the ground doing the work. It's that usually, I would say, probably at least a fifth of vice presidents or people at that level are completely worthless, and you should fire them right now, whoever that is. And you probably, if you're in an executive role, you probably know who that is. You just can't pull the trigger on it. So That's why it's a bad idea. It's not just that, oh, it's the boss and his cronies. It's that there's people. I mean, come on, we've all seen it. We've all been there. I've yet to be in an organization where 100% of the vice presidents or department heads are awesome. So part of it is that the most dysfunctional person usually yells the loudest and oftentimes gets what they want. If that person is above you or lateral, that's frustrating. I'm sorry. If that person is below you and you're just dealing with it because you can't get rid of them or manage them out, that's not good. But okay, that's not the decision-making thing we're probably going to land on, right?
Well, let's just summarize some things. So the people who love a list can go, oh, wow, a clear list. Number one, if you are in a nonprofit organization, the amount of collaboration to I call the shot, just make the decision yourself, has to go up. Collaboration to decision-making ratio has to go up because people are paid with freedom and you've got to get them to say yes. So you spend a lot of time getting buy-in because nonprofits work on buy-in. If people don't buy in, they don't do it, and your only option is to fire them. And because you don't have financial incentives or other carrots to wave in front of them. And so nonprofits are pretty stick heavy. And so it takes a lot more buy-in and a lot more relational time, a lot more relational capital. And therefore you got to be more collaborative. Federal government, there's a lot more collaboration. You can yell all you want, but you have employees that have been there a long time. Takes 2.3 years. Then that's what HR in the federal government said, a third of a manager's time for 2.3 years before you can remove an employee. And so you basically have to get buy-in from employees or you can't get anything moving in a lot of spots there. So it has to have some more collaboration to it. Whereas businesses don't have to collaborate as much. There are times when you need to make a decision and move forward. You have to be very cautious of that, however. And so let's summarize the cautions. If you've got a number of younger employees who have been making decisions in teams all their life, then you've got to really hesitate if you are, boss calls it, or let's listen to what people think and I'll call it, or let's get some people with more experience to call it. And you're going to have turnover of some of your best potential people. It's just not the way younger generations think. Now, as they get older, as they move into executive positions, they'll do it more often, but especially people in their 20s at this stage of the career, it's been so collaborative that can be that almost universally is perceived as, wow, you're excluding me, disengaging me, and you're a little arrogant. And to Alfred Salone's point, you're missing out on great stuff. If you have a team of people that are coming up with the same idea, then you're in essence making the same decision, and you just send them off and get some different ideas. You're dead in the water. And if you have people who are all the same, you don't really have collaboration. You have uniform decision making. And so collaboration requires differences. Differences create conflict. And you probably ought to make the decision if it's going to cause too much tension and conflict, and then you take the hits for it. That's what why the lightning rod is such an apt analogy, because lightning rods expend themselves. If you want to be in charge, if you want to lead for 10 years, you have to do more collaboration. You can't make as many unilateral decisions because every time you do, you burn through chips, you burn through energy. And when a person comes into a nonprofit, for example, and says, hey, I'm going to be in a change role, it's often perceived as a lightning rod experience. I know people who are like, I don't know why it's not going well, because you've been here 2 years and you burn through a lot of things and now you must leave. So another leader who does not have blood on their hands can lead here. I didn't want to leave. My family doesn't want to move. Then you should not have made all those changes that fast. Well, they needed to be done, and that's why the board hired me. Right. They hired you to be a lightning rod, and you've already been burned. You've already burned through, and so you're no good anymore to that organization. You have to go away. But I don't want to go away. Then you shouldn't have taken the job. It was a lightning rod job. You burned through too many chips. You have to turn over the whole organization. So it's easier to turn over you.
Well, and when I said like, oh, I won't do any, any hand-holding or whatever, that's totally not true across the board, because in almost every organization that I'm working with as a client right now, in some ways, there's group A that I can get done, and then group B of objectives that I'm working on getting through. And, one of them just said, hey, it's going to be about 2 years before we can approach this project. And so that's, I don't have a problem with that at all. What drives me crazy is when it's like absolute stagnation. Okay, well, the inmates are running the asylum and we don't want to do this. And so we're going to talk you to death without ever actually starting the actual project. And that's where I just would rather send you to my competitor to let them lose money over you.
That makes complete sense. And it's a matter of absolute frustration with it. Now, I don't usually mind nursing projects through that if I'm getting paid for it. I don't mind the nursing of things. So let's talk. And so when do you collaborate and when do you not? If you have a bunch of people who see the world differently and don't diagnose the problem the same way. So it's one thing to get differences of opinion around what our approaches should be, how we go about it. Mm-hmm. It's a different thing if you have differences of perceptions of reality. You will never get to a collaborative decision if you have different perceptions of reality, different diagnosis of what the problem is, because you're not working from the same sheet of music. You're not working off the same page. And so one of the key things in getting a group on the same page, getting a group making a good decision collaboratively, is to get them to a shared diagnosis of what the problem or what the opportunity is. And Seth, that was really where you were in your situation with that nonprofit. There were people who said, they were like, well, our open rates are too low. Well, those have always been my open rates. Yes, and now MailChimp is going to penalize you. We may be labeled as spam and killed. Yeah, well, that's always been my open rate. Their diagnosis of the problem and your diagnosis of the problem were in two different worlds, and therefore your solutions are incompatible. That's a place where leaders would have to come in and say, hey, we can't lose this. This is really a big problem. And so whoever gets the highest open rates gets to decide the copy. Yeah. Let's have a write-off.
Also called an A/B test in that world. I think the utopian kind of the utopian management situation would actually be that everybody sort of had like a scorecard and, that based on your performance for the business as opposed to your title within the organization, you got more input on what the final decision was going to be. But unfortunately, that's not possible. But, because we're talking about when is it just the VPs and when is it the, kind of the worker bees that get to speak into this thing. The other thing is if you got an organization with a lot of layers, if you're making if you're making a decision at the top that's going to affect somebody 5 layers down, you're not listening to them, you're doing nothing but killing your own profits. I think that there's no better example than in large multi-tiered organizations with a lot of salespeople, and they load these salespeople up with so many things that aren't sales, and then they wonder why they're not selling anything. Because you took away 15 hours of their week with just dumb crap.
Well, that was one of the things that Jeffrey Immelt, when Jeffrey Immelt took over at GE from Jack Welch, one of the 2 things he worked on was getting salespeople selling. He said, when you look at how much time actual time our salespeople sell, it ends up being under 10 hours a week, and we've got to significantly impact that. Yeah, because it was such a great example of where you die a death of 1,000 cuts. So that's, I think, Seth, a key thing to add to the list of when you should collaborate and when you should not. As a leader, you have to do what's called skip level management. You have to skip below other leaders to see what's going on to make sure you're okay. For example, I was working with an organization yesterday, big company, and talking about one-on-ones and the importance of one-on-ones. And people, every time you talk about that, people are like, it's like flossing. I know I need to do one-on-ones. I just don't know how to do them in the real world because life gets in the way. One of the best advantages of doing one-on-ones is you begin to find out what's going on your team so that you can get ahead of it. So let's say you got 3 or 4 people on the team who are beginning to get weird with other team members. So they're getting rough. They're snarky. Stuff's bad mojo is in the making. Well, you don't find out what's really going on if you're not doing one-on-ones until it's 6 months down the road and you got a crisis or a big problem to deal with. And instead, if you were just listening, you'd know, okay, this is the third person that said stuff's weird. And you begin to just nip it in the bud. And it's one of the reasons Barney Fife never had to take the bullet out of his pocket on the Andy Griffith Show is that he nipped it in the bud. And you didn't have to start shooting stuff later on. And so I think what you said is really true. A manager that doesn't go below their managers and ask around from time to time is not doing well by the chain of command, because we all got blind spots, and a good manager has our back. A good manager is making sure we're not missing something. And a matter of fact, we ought to do a whole episode on skip level management, because it's a rarely taught skill. But it's matter of fact, I'm going to write that down in my book. Skip level.
Well, let me give 2 examples there of that. And again, not everybody's going to be in that situation. You could be somewhere in the middle. You could just be a team member right now with nobody reporting to you. But if you are, the 2 best examples I know of that is, number one, in grad school, they had a CEO of a hospital come in and speak. And what he did was he actually would switch jobs with someone once a month. So one day a month, he would mop floors and he would let the janitor hang out in his office and answer his phone. One day a month, he would, assist in drawing blood. I don't think he actually drew blood because he wasn't certified. Assist in drawing blood with a phlebotomist, let the phlebotomist, sit in his office and kind of hang out, have fun, right? Maybe even go to meetings. And then they do a quick, kind of recap of what they both learned, and then they keep moving. And I think that's fantastic. I would say I have ambitions to get to the company to a place where there's multiple levels of management, because it's bigger. So that's something I think about. The other one is Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, before they became a bastion of corporate socialism that basically sucked cash out of county governments and held them hostage and tried to get them to basically, pay for their freaking business. If you can't tell, I really hate Walmart because it's not capitalism, it's socialism. They're just manipulating local governments and trying to force the governments to give them money. But before they were that, when they were just small town America retail, Sam would actually hop into, he would go to like the loading dock and he would hop on a truck, a delivery truck, and he would go there and he would see what was happening. And, he would just walk in the warehouse, walk to the back and see how the employees were behaving, see how the managers were behaving. This is sort of the premise of that TV show, Undercover Boss, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that's such a good idea. But, I don't have time to get into prosthetics and, et cetera. You don't have to. Just go. If you are at that level, you can find a way to go get in the mix of it. One of my very good friends that runs a cold storage warehouse, he will just periodically go run a forklift. He'll periodically go unload a truck with the guys. They love him for it. And he learns something.
I thought you said he disguises himself as a slab of meat.
He puts himself in a box and cuts a small hole to look out of.
If you've ever, when you talk to people who've been on Undercover Boss, they talk about how much they learned.
Yeah.
And skip level management, skip level leadership allows you to make better decisions because you're hearing from the people who are affected by it. Now, there are times when you say, we're still going to do this because our open rate's 9% and we're considered spam on MailChimp. So we're still going to do this. The problem's big enough. The situation is demanding enough. And that idea of switching roles or helping people or getting that other people's level, but also helping the people who work for you to see that the decisions that have to be made about what goes forward in the business are bigger than just their level. That's one of the places where collaboration can hold an organization hostage. If we really do diagnose reality differently, because, and I love what Jack Welch said, that leaders have to look around corners. One of the things that makes a leader is a leader can see around corners. So a leader is going to diagnose the future in a way that some of the employees won't. And the employees will think, I cannot believe you are doing this to us. And the leader is saying, I'm trying to save things. I work for a publishing company, and the guy, they were publishing what is kind of the product they're most famous for. It's been a bestseller for decades. Problem was, it was not done yet. Team of 30 people working on it, and he realized they were going to go out of business. So he forced them to put it out a year earlier than planned, and they were freaking out. And because it was more academic, and they were freaking out that it wouldn't be right. He said, you can fix it later. We're going to go out of business. And that decision saved the publishing house. And it made a lot of people mad. They couldn't see around the corner. They could just see that we're going to get criticism for this not being as good as we wanted it to be. And he was like, oh yeah, and the ultimate criticism is when we board over the windows. That would sting even more. Being told some of your footnotes were a little shaky.
Well, and it seems like we're starting to land the plane here. If I can just recap, I think where we've been so far. Number one, if you're higher up, you need to self-assess. If it's you and the VPs, you and the department heads making decisions, you need to self-assess who's actually on that team. And then relating to another episode we did, if there's more than 7 of you in the room, it's dysfunctional.
Awful hard to manage.
Yeah. And as far as the collaboration goes, it's easier to get collaboration from team members if you're out there doing their jobs with them once in a while and actually getting skip management, getting into the mix of things. And then the third thing I think is you just got to understand that, you're burning cards, right? You only have so many cards to play and you're burning cards each time you do an I told you so. Right. But also,
or now hear this, either one, every time you do this, every time you do one of those, you're burning cards unnecessarily.
Yeah. Now hear this. So it seems like really the happy medium here is to be seeking some collaboration, not at everything, and to be really if you're really good at stuff, it buys you a lot of grace. If you actually care about people, if the organization's moving forward, if profits are going up, if people like their jobs. So this isn't just about collaboration. This is about all those other things, right? So if you're not annoying your team members, if you're not arrogant, if you're not missing out on details of stuff that people want, if you had free coffee and then you took it away, or, you had free coffee that was good, then you got free coffee that was cheap. All that stuff is going to fly in your face when you have to make this decision, which you better not do very often. But one of the ways you can insulate yourself from that is say, okay, I don't agree with this, but that when people are talking about you in the office supply closet, that even they have to say, okay, I'm really ticked about this, but he did or she did all these, all these good things, and we are in a pretty good place as an organization, but I'm really mad about this. That plays a lot different than they took away the good coffee, they gave us cheap coffee, they downgraded our health plan, they took away our Friday option to be flexible and work from home when needed, everything was my way or the highway, and now they're saying, now hear this, and we're just done. I have seen entire departments quit after a now hear this.
Well, that's right. No, that is exactly right. And so to add to your summary, I'd say if you're a business person on a board of a nonprofit, you really do need to understand the difference in collaboration and time it takes to make stuff happen. You move at a different speed when people have freedom and they have to get on board with things. You have to win them over. So it's one of the biggest challenges where business people get frustrated in nonprofits because they work at a different speed. And it's because of how you can make decisions and what you can just announce. And then, are you diagnosing things the same way? If people can't see what's coming or people can't see the problem, you may have to make the call. Or in your case, Seth, you may have to lose MailChimp and start with a whole new system because people don't see it yet. And what you actually need to do is rush faster over the cliff so that the crash helps everybody diagnose it accurately. I know a lot of people don't like this approach to decision making, but sometimes you have to let it get worse before enough people diagnose it accurately so it can get better. And a lot of times we spend all of our efforts trying to hold back the bad when the bad is going to be the only thing that allows us to make a more collaborative, invested, engaged decision. And then if people are all the same, you don't have collaboration, you just have single decision making, you just have a different version of it. So find some people who have different hows that they can offer once you get people on the same page of diagnosing things. Find people with different house to offer so that you can truly collaborate. And that often means, to your point, Seth, different levels of the organization. Understanding what they're seeing at their levels and what unintended consequences might come out of the decision, per your sales illustration.
I want to footnote. I thought we were landing on the plane right there, but I've got one more thing to say about.
And I got more coffee, so I'm good.
And you got more coffee. No, just about the homogeny of opinion, the homogeny of viewpoint, because actually the last episode was about TV shows to watch to get better at business.
Yeah.
The episode of The Bold Type Amanda and I watched last night was all about like a diversity hire and somebody being upset because they legitimately lost the job over it, which, hey, that's kind of fresh on my mind. I had a publication I write for, just pull a movie review because I'm white. And I was like, yeah, but I didn't write this because I'm white. I wrote this because this has major plot holes. Well, yeah, but we just can't have a white person, criticizing a person of color movie like this. It's just not, it's not good. And you know what? I understand why there could be business blowback for them for that. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Just means, well, I mean,
and it doesn't mean there weren't holes in the movie.
Yeah, well, there were tremendous holes in the movie. There are tremendous holes in the movie, and that company has to think through if they're going to publish me. Okay, well, how much could this hurt us in losing subscribers and stuff like that? So,
that's right. It's a complicated decision.
Yeah. But on the, as far as like who's on your leadership team, who are you hiring? One thing I will say that maybe a bland example that people can get their head around because it's like basically not offensive to anybody is the more I grow in business, the more I am actually running into these Ivy League types that for the most part all grew up affluent, had significant help getting internships, are making good money. But, the Zuckerberg, type of Ivy League student that goes out there and creates something brand new, the Ivy League is not creating a lot of those. Chicago Booth and Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management in Chicago, which is a really good MBA program, which takes you based on experience. That's creating hustlers and innovators. They're starting new companies, new products, new ideas. The whole Ivy League thing, usually you make partner or you make VP somewhere. And like, that's what you are. And maybe you get to CEO, but you're not a founder. And so if you're even a large organization that just has a bunch of Ivy Leaguers because you think that's the best thing money can buy, I'm going to have a very different look at life, because I started out my, working career with 3 jobs while going to junior college to like help my mom pay bills. And I've been broke. I've been laid off.
Did the junior college have any ivy on it?
It did not have any ivy on it.
Yeah, you are so far from Ivy League.
And so, I have a different kind of scrapper mentality. I'm going to look at how to make decisions differently because I've been at so many different levels of business, and I've been there, I've, been to $1,200 steak dinners, right? So I've been everywhere in between. It's, if you
I've not been to $1,200 steak dinner.
Well, it was for a few people, but I saw the bill, right? But if you just have people like me, there are stuff that you're going to learn at Harvard that I don't have. And if you just have a bunch of Harvard grads, you're going to get total intellectual homogeny because they all came from the same literal school of management. And you got to be really careful about how you're putting your team together like that. And
all right. I got to stop you there. We'll never finish this episode.
Okay. Why is that?
Decision making, as you can see, sucks in so much of what goes on in organizations. So it can be a very big topic.
Yeah,
but that's all right. An organization that gets just people who came up by their bootstraps ends up with a homogeny. And an organization that says, oh, we want only Ivy Leaguers, and I know those. We only hire from Stanford, Yale, and Harvard. Okay. You're going to get some people who are really smart, can digest a lot of information, and are well connected. And you're going to get a lot of the same thinking. And one of the professors at Harvard wrote a book about about what to do with your life, because when he got cancer, he's like, let me reflect on things. And he said, well, my biggest thing is we produce a lot of the world's corporation leaders, and half of them blow out somewhere in their career. And they fail in very similar ways. They get blowouts in very similar ways. And so homogeny, whatever the homogeny is, will cost you. So think about it when you're building your leadership team. Seth, that's really well said.
Yeah. Hey, he's Hayden Shaw. You can find out more at peopledrivenresults.com. You got these people and process issues like we're talking about in this episode. Hit him up, get the free videos, and get this stuff worked out. My name is Seth Tower Hurd, digitalprofitfarm.com. You just listened to an entire podcast. Imagine if you had your customers listening to similar engaging conversations, and as we talked about in this episode, email marketing got a lot better because you were interesting and not just yelling at people to buy. You can find out more at digitalprofitfarm.com. We'd love to help you get that set up.
Quit making fun of us old people. The way we advertise on social.
It wasn't. Hey, you can search for the Facebook group, The Consultant and the Millennial, and join other like-minded people there that have a place to come have a safe space about stuff like this, about decision-making, that'll give you some fresh voices that are outside of your own leadership tier. And check that out. We'll see you next week.